According to a new poll from CNN of all places, recent immigrant voters, first-generation voters, have shifted 40 points from the Democrats to the Republicans on the question of which party they trust more on immigration. This is a massive shift.
Start off on the fact that immigrant citizens, immigrant voters, foreign-born voters have gone tremendously to the right on this issue in 2024 and 2025 versus where they were in 2020. Closest to or trust more in immigration. You go back to 2020. Democrats, get this, held a 32-point lead on this issue. Immigrant voters were in the Democratic camp. Jump forward to 2024, 2025. Look at that shift, a 40-point shift to the right among immigrant voters.
This guy's right to get worked up. 40-point shifts on any issue in 5 years? That doesn't happen. But I guess now it has.
Republicans now lead on this issue by 8 points over Democrats, more so than any other group that I could find. The group of voters who became more hawkish on immigration were, in fact, immigrants themselves, immigrants who are registered to vote in this country.
So that's on that issue.
I mean, this makes sense. If you jump through hoops and leapt over hurdles to become a citizen of the United States of America, I can understand why maybe these folks don't trust the Democrats after the past 4 years or so on immigration.
How about how they feel about kind of traditionally, historically about Donald Trump?
Yeah. So, you see this shift and you go, what is going on underneath the hood? Well, take a look, Donald Trump. You remember when he first ran back in 2016, immigrant voters were one of his weakest spots. But look at this. Trump's vote share in presidential elections among, again, immigrant citizens, those who are registered to vote. Look at this. In 2016, he got 36% of the vote. You go to 2020, 39% of the vote. Look at this. In 2024, all the way up to 47% of the vote. Some polls.
That's pretty amazing, too. It just goes to show that this recent election was like the 1932 election. At least that's what I believe, where who is a Republican and who is a Democrat and all sorts of things have been jumbled. And now a new landscape, a new political landscape is being created.
Polls I looked at had him barely losing that vote. Some polls I looked at had him barely winning that vote. Again, there is no block of voters that shifted more to the right from 2020 to 2024 than immigrant voters. And Donald Trump, at least in some surveys, actually won that vote. On average, it's about equal. So there may be all this stuff, right, about undocumented immigrants and Trump being harsh on them. But immigrant voters themselves have increasingly liked Donald Trump and have increasingly moved to the right on immigration and into the Republican camp.
Well, then on that, what you're getting.
From a pure politics standpoint, this is particularly bad news for the Democrats. Consider that this demographic moved so much towards Trump, even after practically a decade of Trump is a racist, Trump is this and that, and all of that rhetoric, after a decade of it just being hammered every single day. And this demographic, these recent immigrant citizens, have moved towards him like they have. That's amazing.
Getting at how immigrant citizens, voters, feel about people in the country illegally.
Yeah, and this is where it all kind of comes together, Kate Baldwin. Look at this. The net favorable rating, immigrants who are here illegally, among immigrant citizens, again, those registered to vote. In 2020, look at this, plus 23 points on the net favorable rating. But look at where we were in 2024, minus 6 points, underwater. So immigrant citizens have become increasingly unfavorable in their views of those immigrants who are here illegally. So I think it's so important when we're talking about this debate from a political angle to separate those out who are undocumented immigrants versus those who are here legally and those who are citizens and those who are voters, because that group of voters has felt increasingly distant from those immigrants who are here legally. And so again, when we're talking about this, at least from a political angle, this is why Donald Trump feels so comfortable, because in fact, amongst the group that you would think that would be most opposed to this, in fact, they become increasingly favorable, not just towards Donald Trump, but towards a Republican point of view on immigration and becoming distant from those immigrants who are here illegally.
Yeah, an important baseline.
Now, again, I say this from purely a political standpoint here, okay? But no wonder Trump felt comfortable sending in the Marines.